Hey guys, I have a little time between classes, so I'm going to do something I haven't done before, which is to, well, I have done it actually, but I'm going to do it more conscientiously. I'm going to play Baldur's Gate 2 and listen to lost dialogue from Terence McKenna. So here we go.
What is eschatology? Eschatology is the study of final things, the end of the world, the general judgment, the consummation and apotheosis of the world. And usually the end of the world is considered as the coming or the immanentizing of the eschaton. These are words unfamiliar to people not familiar with patristic theology, being the theology worked out in the generation after the apostles. People like Tertullian, Origen, Justinian, these people. The mission of Christ left many questions unanswered, and of course one of them was this promise made, Amen, amen, I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away, but that I shall return, or in some form, this promise of the return. So the great distinguishing characteristic of the Western religions is, unlike Buddhism, unlike Taoism, they insist that God will come tangential to history at some point. And this is a confounding promise, but it is made over and over again in the Western religious tradition. It was an idea of the Jews that finds its focus in the notion of the Messiah. And of course, for the heterodox Jews who became Christians, Christ was this entry into history of the divinity, and then the Jews that remained Orthodox, they prefer to hang on for yet another Messiah. I always, as a child, then found the parts that I liked best as the priest made his way through the yearly cycle of sermons was the part about the end of the world, about the general judgment and the raising of the dead, the resurrection, which was the great promise of Christianity that went so far beyond any other claims. I mean, the resurrection of the body is a central teaching of Christianity and absolutely unique in the history of religion. So I am interested in the apocalypse and eschatology because, as a secular thinker with a pseudo-scientific bent, I nevertheless perceive in the world around me and as a conclusion of my own formal studies that our world appears to be ending. In a sense, the prophecies of Revelation are poised to come true. Not that they haven't always been poised to come true. I mean, Frederick Barbarossa was identified as the Antichrist. Hitler was identified in the Antichrist. Late at night on my radio 15 years ago, Muammar Gaddafi was presented as the Antichrist. One of the things that this Christian theory of history does is it encourages one to examine current events to see if they fit the so-called apocalyptic scenario, because if they are found to fit, then one can legitimately leap to the conclusion then that the final days are upon us. And this has happened many, many times. Joaquin of Flora being a recent Christian example of this. And there are secular millenarian theories as well, Marxism being the most spectacular example. I mean, the Marxist belief in the withering away of the state is hardly less improbable than the resurrection of the body. I would submit to you. So this is a question for our times. It has a relevance it may not have had for previous centuries, because even if you are absent a religious point of view, you can feel, I think, a profound sense of crisis in the natural world caused by the uncontrolled and unmanaged expansion of human populations and human activities. And Brother David, I'm sure, brings a somewhat more orthodox religious perspective to this. We've known each other for years. I know that in a sense our points of view probably meet
like bunnies.
in the ideas of someone like Teilhard de Chardin, who was a great secular
because you asked
an
nicely.
evolutionary primatologist, and a great religious thinker, philosopher, Jesuit theologian, and so forth and so on. And I don't know how much Brother David knows about Teilhard de Chardin. A lot, I'm hoping.
He's very important in that.
Well, maybe you could say something about him.
Well, I'd rather not start with the Chardin, but when you were, first of all, with the topic, it came as a surprise to me. Terence and I, as Terence said, have known one another for quite some time, and I also feel that we see very much eye in eye and agree. And I suggested actually that while we're close together here at the same time, we might have a few dialogue and then Terence suggested the topic, and I was at first very surprised because that was kind of not something that's particularly in the center of my interest. But the more I thought about it, the more I got interested in it, and I know now that it is quite central and really very important. It gives access to many very important things, both things that interest us today and things that are important for us, and they do not always coincide with one another. And so I would first maybe latch on to something that you said about the expectation of Jesus of the imminent end of time. And that seems to be fairly well established today, and it's a very important point because up to very recently, most people who were at all interested in Christian teachings or in anything that has to do with Christianity and the Christian tradition, most of those people were particularly interested in what the Christian church, in the widest sense of churches, teach about Jesus. And either they were interested because they wanted to believe it, or they were interested because they wanted to refute it. And in recent decades, a very important switch has taken place in this respect, because more and more people, both inside the church and outside the church, are not at all interested so much in what the church is teaching about Jesus, but what Jesus was teaching in the first place. And it's a very important switch. And so that means also a different relationship to Judaism. What you rightly characterized as deviant Judaism is not, of course, the teaching of Jesus. In order to what is maybe one or two generations later, it begins very early, but it crystallizes out really clearly only after the fall of Jerusalem, so after the 70s.
Is this the thanks
A rabbi whose name, unfortunately, I don't remember, I'd like to give him credit, is a rabbi in Spokane, Washington. He had this very beautiful image, very memorable image for the development of Judaism and Christianity. He said, until the year 70, the two were really one. Christians considered themselves, even if they called themselves Christians, which wasn't from the very beginning, but considered themselves Jews who believed in Jesus and followed the teaching of Jesus, a great rabbi within Judaism. and they moved in and out of synagogue. In some synagogues they were more welcoming and other places. There was also a very wide spectrum of Christian churches. You shouldn't get the idea there was this one Christian church. There were many, as we find in the New Testament, great variety reflected of Christian churches, and some of them were very close to Judaism, undistinguishable. The letter of James, for instance, in the New Testament, could be a Jewish document, the name of Jesus isn't here in it or anything. Typically Christian doesn't really appear in it at all. And on the other hand, you have, like say, the letter to the Corinthians, a Hellenistic community, and that's very Hellenistic, and also quite early already. So you have this wide spectrum. But to understand Jesus and the teaching of Jesus is also about the last things, the eschatology.
Where goes the stench of evil?
One
So
has to
goes
see
the
the
cleansing wind of Minsk.
this apocalyptic climate, I guess that one could call it, end time climate, very similar to ours actually, very similar to our time, that existed around the time of Jesus. Was well prepared by the history of the Jewish people and the apocalyptic literature, of which the book of Revelations in the New Testament, the last book of the New Testament, also often called the Apocalypse by its Greek term, was one example. That apocalyptic literature is typically Jewish, that goes back to, well, the first typical beginning would be Daniel.
A sound suggests.
I think a year 165 before, somewhere around before the common era, so roughly. So this went on for about 200 years, this apocalyptic literature, until soon after the fall of Jerusalem, occupation of the Romans. Now, many people throughout the history of Christianity, and many people today also, even people who are not very closely associated with any church, are interested in this book of the Apocalypse and in the images that are in there and so forth, and try to take them as a kind of prediction of what is going to happen all along. This was always taken. Always in the crisis period, they said, oh, there's, for instance, the great beast with the number 666, that's the number, and it says that the reader should mark that well, because that will give you the clue. And in every crisis situation for 2,000 years, 666 has been very well and absolutely convincingly interpreted as always the one person that people wanted to interpret it for. Hitler fitted perfectly. I think everybody fitted it. Everybody fitted it. They could, just by manipulating the numbers and the letters and the numerical value of letters and so on, it always fitted, you see. So this historicizing and this applying, taking the apocalypse as if it were something like Nostradamus, also quite confusing by the way, that predicts what is going to happen, that is not faithful to the understanding of apocalyptic literature. So even if it might be disappointing to some people, one has to say that right from the start, that we know enough historically about apocalyptic literature, we know what it wanted to do. And it was a style in which things that had already happened were presented as if from the perspective of long ago. In other words, it was a prophecy after the fact. As if we would, for instance, today write an apocalypse about Hitler, and describe the rise and fall of the Reich out of the perspective, let's say, of someone who lived in the Middle Age. And we would take some very famous person, that was the style. We took a very famous person long ago, pick anybody, say Nostradamus, you know, and then you would write this book today, and you would attribute it to this person, and you would say, and you would say that it was sealed and not revealed until now. And that was not considered a lie by anybody. Not considered a lie. Today, if you did that, everybody would say, oh, this is just a lie, or fraud, or something. Well, everybody knew that this is the way they were doing it. So that was perfectly allowable. Then what was the use of it? Were you just misleading people? No, you were interpreting what was happening. And the importance of apocalyptic literature is that it tells you something about not the historic future primarily in the senses of giving you a coded view of what is going to happen in the future, but it tells you about the always imminent future, and particularly in the present. So it helps you take the right position in the present towards the future. That's what it wants to do. And the future means things that are going to happen historically, so that is in a sense the historic future, and the ultimate future, that is the fulfillment of our human purpose as community, fulfillment of our human dreams. And that's where the millennium comes in. The millennium is a term that means 1,000, is taken from a passage in the Apocalypse, in this particular Apocalypse, the book of Revelations, where it is said that Christ comes and reigns for 1,000 years, and all the just reign with him. And after that, then the devil is bound, and after that the devil is loosed again, and then comes the final battle. So the decisive thing that apocalyptic literature wants to do for us, or wanted always from the beginning, is it is written out of a crisis situation in history. It wants to encourage the people who are in this crisis situation by showing them, possibly it might get worse than it is now, but in the end, our dreams will come true, our highest aspirations will come true, and right now take the right stance. And this is where, so to say, where my axe comes in, with the axe that I have to grind. I am not particularly bothered by somebody playing around and saying, oh, this means this and this means this and means that. That's fine. But I am saddened by somebody who spends all the energy on trying to figure out what these different symbols mean and not takes a stance right now and says, and this is what we can do to make the world closer to our better place. And that was, one has to clearly see some scholarly verdict, so to say, that was the intention of every apocalypse.
Is there an identifiable series of historical events that the book of Revelation is actually talking about, that it was written in the style you described, anticipatory style?
Yes. Not anticipatory, but after the fact.
After the fact.
After the fact, yes. Okay. No, I'm not a scholar of the apocalypse, so I can't go through point by point and show it to you. But yes, if you take, for instance, a annotated Bible, like the Bible of Jerusalem, that's a very good one today, you will have the scheme and you will see what they did, and when it was probably written, was probably, I looked it up today, but I've already forgotten. It was probably written around the year 95. That is the earliest. However, it is possible that under Nero, which would be around 50 or so, a first part was written. Apparently, it wasn't written all in one piece. There are different pieces that were eventually edited and put together. But when the real first great persecution broke out, and it is explicitly written for Asia, see, there's a very specific audience, and it begins in the second and third chapter. The whole first chapter is a letter on the churches, more or less in general. The second and third chapter are letters to the 7 churches in Asia Minor. So it is explicitly for Asia Minor, and you find quite detailed. You find even names of people there, of people who own these churches, and it is written to encourage them. In a very specific situation, the emperor was enforcing emperor worship. And for the first time, see, Nero had persecuted the Christians, but he had just made them the scapegoat for all his crazy things, and had nothing specifically religious about it. But then Domitian was the one. The Emperor Domitian, had a temple built for his own worship in Ephesus, in Asia Minor, exactly at that time, in the middle of the 90s, and forced Christians either to worship the emperor or be executed. And that was the occasion, apparently, for writing this. And you have then the harlot that sits on the this dome, of course, with its 7 hills, and the emperor and this beast that has the 7 heads, or the 7 crowns, or 10 heads, 7 crowns. All this is standard in apocalyptic literature. You count and you see how many emperors there were, and how many hills, and how many this and that, and it's all deliberately metaphorical. But one can place it, and there are, of course, many things that are not historical. You can't say, well, this has already happened. And that part that is not historic, that also belongs to Apocalypse, is then the consolation part.
Only because you asked
Jerusalem
nicely.
comes down like a bride from heaven, and God and the just are justified, and they sit in judgment over the others, and so forth. This hope, the hope of vengeance and ultimate justification and of ultimate peace. That is the decisive thing. That's the millennium. Is that the great hope of all humans. And that is what's so important to me, not merely religious, whether it be Jewish or Christian or biblical or whatever in particular. That's not important to me, but that in this apocalyptic literature you find a profound human concern, and the more specific you are for this time and for this place of the world, the more in the specific you see the universal, and that's also why we feel so attracted to this literature, because we also live in a time of confusion, and we live in a time where we see that things are not as they should be, and we hope for fulfillment of the human dream, and we hope that, well, whether we call it God or whatever else it is, the force or whatever, will ultimately set things right.
And was this notion of the New Jerusalem, is that a general notion in this literature? Does it occur earlier in Jewish thinking, or is this a unique
Very good question, but again, I must admit, I don't know. I have not come across it earlier, but that doesn't mean anything at all. But it is partly an answer to your question, that these elements that you find there are quite interchangeable. And for instance, when we speak about the end, the eschaton and so forth, we usually think the cataclysm. See, this great catastrophe. Now, that is only one of the images that is used. There is a completely different image that you also find in apocalyptic literature, and side by side with it, actually, in the Book of Revelation, side by side with it, and that is the triumph of the those who have been suffering and oppressed and exploited and so on. They suddenly triumph, and on clouds of heaven they go up to their reward or something like that. Just the triumph is there. And then another completely different element is the judgment, because they overlap. But the great judge comes, and books are opened, and it's not the individuals. You see, the apocalypse, and in general, these apocalyptic hopes of the human race that you find there. You find them in the ghost dances, for instance, and so forth. It's not really limited to the Bible. Sure, the ghost dances may be a little influential.
No, but this is a general human
tendency. So you find that there too. And then it's always communal. It's not private. It's not personal. We have a goal for the whole human community, and that tells us something as to what to do today.
To what degree do you think Christ was millenarian and apocalyptic For instance, this saying I quoted, Amen, amen, I say to you, this generation shall not pass away, that was the basis for this expectation of a second coming.
Yes.
Talk a bit about Christ's attitude before the patristic writers got a hold of it.
This amen, amen, I say to you, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away, or this generation will not pass away until the kingdom comes in power, and so forth. That is, some of this is quite probably statements that go back to Jesus historically. One's never totally sure, but that is quite likely. But one can also see, just by comparing the different writings of the New Testament according to their age, that the longer it goes, the more there is this prophecy of Jesus coming back. You see, that Jesus spoke of himself as coming back is very unlikely, particularly because he hadn't gone away. He was there, so why did he talk about coming back? It is quite likely that towards the end of his life, he saw where things are leading. I mean, any intelligent person would have seen at that point that they would wipe him out, precisely because we haven't touched on this yet, but because it brought about an authority revolution. The hopes, the millenarian hopes of the human race throughout history, and wherever they spring up, are egalitarian. That will all be. It is not only for the rich one, or for the men, or for the whatever it is, the privileged class, but it's for all of us. And for Jesus, because he was this mystic who turned social reformer, he tried to establish this egalitarian society, which he called the kingdom of God. And the underdogs were empowered. That's what he does. That's what you can clearly see historically. Goes around, he empowers women that were totally disempowered at his time. Children, the sinners, the so-called sinners, the outcasts, and so on. The sick, because the sick were also considered to be sinners, because why would they be sick? They must be sinners to be sick. That was the popular notion. So if he encourages people, makes them stand on their own 2 feet, makes them stand up, that was empowering them. That was an authority revolution. It's also clearly shown in the story where he, for instance, washes his disciples' feet and says, in the worldly world, those who are called masters lord it over others. With you it should be the opposite. The greatest among you should be the servant of all, and so forth. So he turns all this upside down. And that gets him in trouble with the authorities, because the authoritarians keep themselves up and putting others down. You have to have a deep inner authority to empower others. And the people say, oh, this man speaks with authority, not like our authority. That's on the first page of the oldest gospel that we have, Mark. And that is his death sentence, because the authorities will not tolerate that. And they will put him out of the law, and they did eventually. And then comes this idea that his disciples, this is what's called the resurrection. What else there historically is behind it, we don't know, we can't reconstruct it, but he lives on. This kind of life cannot be extinguished, and they are suddenly convinced of that. Not in the beginning of the New Testament, but if you know historically, it's one of the authors sort of actually more towards the end in the book, but that's probably the earliest writing of as we have them now, long before the Gospels. There it says that he will come on the clouds of heaven, and this whole apocalyptic purpose, just like out of the Old Testament apocalyptic. And then in the later letters, very much towards the end, like Peter, also what must have been written in the beginning of the 2nd century, it says, many say, well, we were expecting this coming and it doesn't happen and so forth, what is it? And then he says, before God, 1,000 years are like one day. And so this is kind of nice way out. But they had to completely change their expectation. But the essence was always the same. Right now, it doesn't have to do primarily with the future. It has to do with the present. Right now, act in such a way that when it comes, you will have done the right thing. I think that's the most important message for us today.
Did Christ specifically teach the resurrection of the body, and is that why there was this expectation of his return?
Did not teach the expectation.
He did not teach the resurrection of the body.
That wasn't something he would even talk about. Resurrection was with one group of Jews, with the strongest one at the time, with the Pharisees. Resurrection was simply accepted, and
that was Jewish teaching.
That was Jewish teaching, so he didn't have to teach
of the body.
And the distinction between a resurrection and a resurrection of the body was unthinkable for the Hebrew mind. If you had said to somebody, yeah, there will be a resurrection, but not a resurrection of the body,
because they had no notion.
There was no notion of anything other than the body. You are somebody, as you also say. You are somebody. So if you are, your body right.
But by the 2nd century, Justin was teaching that the resurrection body would be spherical.
Yeah, and I didn't remember that, but that's interesting. Because it is perfect.
Yes, that was why he said it has to be perfect, so it has to be spherical.
But that would actually, if it interests you later on, that might be a very interesting question. Can a sophisticated person at the end of the 20th century believe in the resurrection of the body? I mean, what do you mean by that? There are millions of Christians who recite the creed and they say, I believe in the resurrection of the body. Well, what do you mean by it? I do it.
What does it mean to you?
At your order.
Absolutely.
With all speed, comrade. What is it for honor and glory? Hell guides my path.
In order to talk about it, I have to help us get out of that frame of mind in which we normally find ourselves, and that is boxed into clock time.
Anything you need, I can likely provide, I assure you.
And Panikar, the movie Panikar, has this very good saying, I think it's even the title of his book, the future does not come later. The future does not come later. If you think it comes later, then you're not talking about the right thing. We may be talking about something that's not the future. The future does not come later. The future is the openness of the present moment to everything. Now, we experience that, and that might be one way of getting out of this box of time, because we all know what we mean by now. And we identify now with that little stretch of time between the future and the past. This moment, the moment is now. But I am now. You know what that means. That must take place, so to say, we think, between the future and the past, because in the future we will be. You cannot say I am. In the future I am now, not in the future of that clock time. And in the past I am not, I was. So between I will be and I was is I am.
The best leaders also follow.
But this now, in which alone I am, can be. Is has only one of the now.
Never.
This can be cut in half of it is a moment, and half it's a stretch of time, and half of it is not because it's no more, and the other half is not because it's not that. So where do you find now? You say, well, there's still thinner, it's still thinner. As long as it is any stretch of time, you can cut it in half. So this brings home to our experience that the now which we know is not in time. It's not in time. We extend out of time. We are in time and out of time. T.S. takes this expression. The moment in and out of time. So every moment is in time. It participates in this process where the past continuously meets up the future, but it also participates in something that is totally beyond time. That future that doesn't come later, this openness. And we say, I am.
Tengo
now,
200, tráeme
and this
200
is
más para
God.
que sean
I
400 para el
am.
gas.
The divine presence. You stick right into the divine presence in every moment. And Augustine defined eternity, which is the mode of God's being. God is not in time, God is eternal. Eternity is not a long, long time. Eternity is the now that doesn't pass.
¿Qué te puedo decir?
That makes
Si no llega el
the
pollito.
standing now.
And we experience that every moment. We have access to it every moment. And they are our best moments. And most of the time we forget it.
I shall go forth at your
But
command. It
they
shall be
are
done
most
and
alive
done
moments.
well.
Time stands still. Either we think
Bueno,
that
entonces
it's just a
200 de
moment and
efectivo.
hours have gone by, or we think that hours and days have gone by, and that's
Pollitos
just a
son
moment.
60
The relationship between the inner
y
time and the
50
outer
de
time is
pasajes son
completely
son
simple. We
110,
have our experience
310.
in a variety.
And how does this lead toward illuminating the resurrection of the body?
And that,
450,
okay, now if we are really out of this box of time,
155,
then clock
son
time
300, 400.
is something that will be up from me at one time. When my time's up, when I die, my time's
Van a
up.
poner 500 y 3 comidas, ¿verdad?
I know that other people may feel differently about it. I can only tell you about myself. But for me personally, this is an enormous relief. If I would have to think that I would live on and on and on, and after millions of years, when we have been there 10,000 years bright shining as the sun, yeah, there's something very beautiful poetic about that. But if I should think that those are 10,000 years, and then come another 10,000 years, another 100,000 years, and so it would be not only boring, it would be unbearable, impossible. This is just a poetic image for the now that doesn't pass away, in which I think perfectly comfortable for So when my time is up, I will be glad I will be glad. Not like to die, but the aspect that time comes to an end right now is very what is that time that comes to an end?
Do we pace about in this evening train of thought? There is no glory in watching the grass grow.
So what happens is that the moment time is up, I have all my nows, or there are not many nows, now doesn't have a plural. I have this now into which I stuck out of every single moment, I possess it all of life. And that is why it makes me, that is how I can in a more sophisticated talk
Start
about the
killing things already.
that is my life, my now, in my body as a child, in my body as an adult, in my body as a mature person, as an old person. Every moment, my now is part of, my body is part of this now. And when time is over, these molecules will be bright, but these molecules are not the same ones that I had as a child. Every few years I change them.
Start
Every few
killing
weeks
things
I change them.
already.
So you're saying the resurrection of the body is the reclamation of the total path of the experience,
It's the having.
the having of the total of having.
To be liberated from time. And so, possessing the now, of which the body is. What else is there? We are some body. And we have it all. As soon as we're liberated from the next moment, that will again take away this moment. So there is nothing to take away this now, and you have it. And in that you have your body. And the beautiful thing, this is very individualistic up to this point. That since everything hangs together with everything, and since according to the biblical, Jewish Christian notion, the body is the means for communion. Communication. The body is what we all have in common. We all, that's why everybody goes back to Adam and Eve, for instance. We have to have one pair of because the body is what unites us. We all have the same body. And that is why in the center of the Christian tradition is the body of Jesus, which is the presence of God among us, broken into privileges among everybody. This is my body, and eat, take, and eat, and we all eat one another. And it's not just the thing, but this whole cosmos is a big eating society where everybody eats everybody. This communion of this wedding feast where everybody eats everybody, this communion has very much to do with the body. And so when I have my now, and everything hangs together with everything, through this now, I have access to everything.
Quiero aquí de la,
to the whole
¿cómo
universe,
se
everything
llama?
that ever was and ever is. And I think in our psychedelic moments we have this experience too. This
So really what you're saying is that all of these doctrines and hypostatizations are
Creo que es de 20
have to
pesos.
do with time and different ways of looking at time and understanding the relationship of being to time.
Yes, particularly this topic, and that's why I find it so interesting, this topic that has to do with the end of time, the eschaton is in and out of time, also the end of time, end of history, the end of time, and that which goes beyond time, that is always part of the eschaton. In every tradition you have
Well, do you believe, or is it reasonable to expect God entering history at a collectively discernible moment?
Well,
Or do you think that that's a naive...
I would not personally put it in this way, but the way I would say it is that in our best moments, either we cannot use this term God, and I have no qualms with anybody who can't use it, because those who do use it have already learned it from us. But if we mean by it the ultimate and the grounded being of the world, and all that is positive about God, and the ultimate if those who use God in this sense would know that in our best moment, we know that God is closer to us than we are to ourselves as our and that God has entered into history before history was. That history, in contrast to just time, which is a void sequence of intervention, history is our relationship to God, individually and communally.
So I hear that as a big no to my question. It's sort of like when you ask, it's sort of like when you ask a Buddhist if someone attains enlightenment, will we all be immediately enlightened? And then they reply, no, enlightenment is something which comes and goes, and it's already there. But clearly, someone like the Chardin thought something very different.
Well, then we come into Chardin at this point, because as far as I can see, he was very orthodox as a Christian, but he calls the point omega, everything leads to this ultimate convergence, everything that rises must converge. What he calls the point omega is the fulfillment in history, or beyond history, of this longing, this new longing, that is the divine spirit within us. And that is actually fulfilled through the structures, through the social structures of which the world, I was very interested in those, and through various forms of evolution, evolution,
a very strong evolution.
Very much so. So all this leads somewhere, but it doesn't mean that God at that point enters, but maybe one could almost say that God starts blooming, the seed was there now, bearing fruit or whatever, blooming. It's kind of a more organic thing than waiting on one plant that comes out from the outside. God cannot come from the outside. Thomas Merton, I'm sure many of you know Thomas Merton from his writings, Pioneer, East-West Dialogue, and the Pappy Slang. He made a statement that I consider one of the most important theological statements of our century. Not that it's new, but it's well expressed. God isn't somebody else. If you think of somebody else, you're not talking about God. God isn't somebody else. That doesn't mean I am God. It's a very different statement. It can still be God. This is the thing. But if you think that God is not God, at the same time, the horizon of horizon, beyond the beyond. It is so beyond the beyond that God is even beyond our notions of beyond, and therefore perfectly compatible. God's being beyond is perfectly compatible with God being more intimate.
So do you think that human history has a future?
I think so. And that is the point where I would ask you what you think about the particular point that the Mayan calendar, for instance, goes on. When I remember correctly,
Point the sword, and I shall
in Italy, I
strike.
heard you talk at Cortona about this. It's fascinating.
Well, it's very interesting to listen to you because in a way you are the secularist
Chequen
and
la
I
pisada.
am the fundamentalist.
En la piña, digo.
Because I have no trouble at all believing that the laws of nature appoint a finite time to our sojourn
Que le
in
dejó un olor a
time,
morra.
and that God, or let us say, the present appetite for completion
Eso suena tan,
could
pero
gather
tan
us
gay.
to its bosom
No vas
at
a
any
sonar gay,
moment.
güey, pero es real.
Sí,
It
pues
seems
eso
to
me
me,
imagino.
I always
Hell
felt
sees
that
all.
the test
Know
of
that,
your
and be
religious
judged.
faith would be to open your door in the morning and to see the ocean boiling and to feel perfect confidence that this was nature on schedule with its own transformation. When I ask you, do you think history has a future, what I mean is, can you conceive of human beings on this earth 500, 1,000, 5,000 years in the future? It seems to me that we are at the end of our sojourn
Todos sus
in
hijos, ¿cómo los va a
matter
querer?
is
Nomás que
visible.
no les gusta
And
que
that
la
if
chupen.
God isn't going to come and get us, we're probably going to just leave on our own, of our own volition.
Up to that point where God's coming to get us, I completely agree with you. Because humanly speaking, when you look at our situation as it is today, it's very difficult to even anticipate that it's going to go on that long. The only thing that gives me great hope is that, and I think we talked about it just recently, that statistically speaking, we should have wiped ourselves away long ago. You know, we should have wiped ourselves out 40 years ago, possibly. Only now, gradually, I'm going to tell these people who are a little bit in the know how close we come to these nuclear explosions and nuclear complete destruction of the world.
Right.
It is against all probability that we are still around. So I don't need to invoke God as somebody who sits up above the clouds and manipulates that. I believe that Gaia herself has within this self-preservation instinct or something that somehow prevents it. We don't know enough about that. But I can imagine, very well imagine, that at the time that we have figured out, or the Mayans have figured out at some earlier time, we wake up, or I wake up in the morning if I'm still around and look out and the ocean is boiling. I can very well imagine that. And that would then be, to me personally, similar to my death. Because one day I will wake up and no longer wake up or something like that. It will be the end of my time, so I will then know this is now probably the end of all of history.
You must gather your party before venturing forth.
And then there will be some culminating.
Well, when God becomes tangential to your own personal history, that is the moment of your death. And isn't it doctrine that there
It is
is
good to adventure in such a
a
place.
personal
Blood
judgment
quickens knowing
Exactly.
evil
and
is
then, and then later a universal judgment?
Right.
So it's in a sense suggesting that the life of the individual, which ends in death, and the meeting of God is a
Glad to be of assistance.
reasonable metaphor or analogy for the life of the species, which ends in death and the meeting with God, the collective meaning God. The general judgment implies the extinction of the species because everyone is dead finally at one single moment.
Right, but see, that is where then my transition, what I call what I answered to you and to the question of the resurrection of the body, where this transition from this time, which then will be up.
Live by the sword. Live a good,
Whatever comes to an
long
end, not
time.
necessarily for the universe, but whatever comes to an end. And when that time is up, then the now of all for which the time is up, say the human family, our time as a human race is up, then all our nows, that's a different thing from my private nows, my personal now. And the now of the whole human race will be accessible to all of us. And there I have to introduce one other element that I can only express in a line for T.S. Eliot, but it's really an element that's necessary for my dealing with this, and it's the line from the Four Quartets: what has been and what could have been point to one end which is always present. What has been and what could have been point to one end which is always present. So when I have then this now, I have not only what has been, but also what could have been. And so I can imagine that all these possibilities then bloom forth. And it isn't necessary that we achieve as a human race whatever we hope for and whatever we strive for. At that point, it's sort of a race, which one comes earlier. If we are set towards that, we will accomplish it, but in a realm beyond this clock time that we know now. And that hangs together very closely again with the resurrection, because either you say that the life of Jesus was a complete flop, I mean, everything that he stood for was totally destroyed on the cross, or you say that in time, it was cut off, and precisely at that point it opened up into beyond time, and as Paul puts it, his life is hidden in God. And our life in God will be hidden in God, according to Paul. So we are now in this other realm, in this now, that's the realm of God. The I am, the is realm. And so Jesus' life is fulfilled there.
So your explanation of the resurrection of the body at the last judgment, I understand, but clearly something much more concrete happened to Christ. He did not simply possess the sum total of his whole life. He actually rolled the stone away and stood before them beyond life.
Right. Well, I personally believe that. But that is a belief that is not based. But the main thing that I have to say to it is that this belief is not necessary for reciting the creed and saying I believe that Christ rose from the dead. It's not necessary to say that the tomb was empty. If for some reason they would discover somewhere a tomb, and historically we can say this is the tomb of Jesus, and historically we find the bones of Jesus in there, that would make no difference to the belief in the resurrection.
But you say you
But I personally believe that. And I believe personally, not so much believe, it's not so much part of my religious belief. My religious belief had not much to do with whether Jesus walked around or not walked around afterwards. That is religious curiosity, it's not an element of deep faith,
I understand.
Life, but I personally believe it, and I'll tell you why. Because this Shroud of Turin, and I don't know whether anyone of you is familiar with the Shroud, is totally convincing to me.
If you say so.
Totally convincing. Even though recently they did this Carbon 14 thing test and it didn't come out. There are books now in German, unfortunately I haven't found anything in English yet, that show how this test was messed up and how the thing right.
That's why you believe in the physical resurrection of Christ?
Yeah, because otherwise it isn't important.
Of the Shroud of Turin?
No, because otherwise it isn't important. But this makes me think
that something may have happened.
That makes me think that something did happen.
Have you and I ever discussed this curious line in the gospel at that incident where Christ says to one of the Marys, "Touch me not, woman, for I am not yet fully of the nature of the Father." What do you think he could possibly have meant by that, since he stands before them alive, having conquered death, and he says, "I am not yet fully of the nature of the Father"? Well, it implies to me that a process that requires time to complete itself.
I think I do.
That's all I can imagine, that becoming whatever he was in the post-living state was not instantaneous. It was something which required a gestation.
That is obviously how it was done. But you see, for me, I definitely have the greatest respect for anybody who takes these words, because they are written in the Gospel according to John, and takes them as the words of Jesus and sets their heart on it and believes them and so on. I have the greatest respect. The last thing that I would want to do is destroy somebody's innocent faith about that. But I have to be also faithful to my degree of sophistication, and I must say that this particular gospel is by far the latest of the gospels, the comparison with the others, is not really in most of its parts, and though there are some very interesting and strictly historical parts to it, better than the other two, but as a whole, it is a theological development of the Gospels, of theology, and that this, especially the resurrection accounts, are just so saturated with theological perfection that
presupposition.
It touches on Gnosticism. There's
It is a portrait of what has happened and what may. Do you cling to the past, or can you see through the pain? You feel the potential within.
Somehow, because of
Will
the
you
letters
cringe
of
from
John,
what you know you want, what you can tell is your own?
accepted. And in the letters of John,
You know what you want. It is you, after all, which has brought us to this room. Nothing is real.
overcome this Gnosticism. And Jesus came not only in the spirit, but in the blood, in the water and the blood. And so it is very much hammered in. So the gospel itself was bordering on Gnosticism, Gnostic speculation. So I'm saying all this only because quite possibly this whole idea of gradual stages by which one body is already very late superstructure. And I can live as a Christian and with great conviction and joy with very basic things that are historically very well attested of who Jesus was, what he preached, what kind of person he was, and what happened to him.
What now?
I'm ready. Just ask, and I'll do it.
Every hamster has his day. Bark your orders already.
What is it now? I shall go forth at your command. Point the sword, and I shall strike. hear you well enough.
Armored, stand back for justice! Bo says, "See battle bow, run bow, run!"
Where can I be of most use? I'll certainly try.
I stand amongst the righteous.
How can I help? Of course.
At your order. What is it now?
Am I needed? It's almost beneath.
I shall go forth for honor and glory.
Please, let me help. Is that all? I'd hoped for more.
Point the sword, and helm guides my path.
You point, I punch. Make way, villainy! Hero coming through! Yeah!
I hear you well enough. The best leaders also follow. I stand amongst the righteous.
Swords, not words!
At your order, it shall be done, and done well. What is it now? I have lost.
Yeah, go if you insist.
Musket aids, Minsk and Bull stand ready.
I shall go forth at your command. Point the sword, and I shall strike. I hear you well enough. I stand amongst the righteous. Very well.
Finally! Someplace livable.
At your order.
Oh, bold warriors all, the sundial be turning on the appointed task, and I prevail upon ye all to hasten it. Every hamster has his day.
What is it now?
Armored, sharpened, and raring to go.
I shall go forth at your command.
Yes.
What?
Just ask, and I'll do it.
Point the sword, and I... With all speed, comrade. I hear you well enough.
Bo says, what?
Where can I be of most use? Hmm.
Eh?
How can I help?
I stand amongst the righteous.
Am I needed? Please, let me help. I will do what I can.
At your offer, honor and glory.
I'm ready for anything. Glad to be of assistance.
Long live the order of the most radiant heart, for I draw from the pool of light and strike in their name.
Just ask, and I'll do it. If only I could do as much for all in need of me. How can I be of most use?
I shall go forth at your command. I punch. Okay.
I'm waiting. How can I help?
Swords, not words!
Yes.
Be quick with it.
More effect?
What now?
No effect? I need bigger sword. Minsk and bull stand ready.
I'm waiting. Yes.
Yes?
What do you want, groundling? I need speedy assistance, my friend, or I shall not be able to fight on.
No effect? I need bigger sword.
What? Oh, I suppose we'll need a replacement.
I'm waiting.
Eh?
Yes.
Every hamster has his day. Be bloody blood. Must get aid soon. Boo is too young to have to avenge me. Parkeror, I'll do as you wish. For now.
Yes? Oh, if you insist. What? A sound suggestion.
You point. Where Minsk goes, evil stands aside.
Eh? Easy enough. Only because you asked nicely.
What now?
An intriguing proposal. Yes, fine.
Well, you have obviously given considerable thought to the future of this group. What is it now? Very well.
Life is strength. This is not to be contested. It seems logical enough. You live, you affect your world. But is it what you need? You are different inside. This woman lives and has strength of a sort. She lost her parents to plague, her husband to war, but she persevered. Her farm has prospered, her name is respected, and her children are fed and safe. She lived as she thought she should. And now she is dead. Her land will be divided, her children will move on, and she will be forgotten. She lived a good life, but she had no power. She was a slave to death. I wonder if you are destined to be forgotten. Will your life fade in the shadow of greater beings? You are born of murder, the very essence of that which takes life. You have power if you wish it. Really, but the consequences are so very real. Your actions affect so many others than yourself. You will come to realize how little choice you have. You will do what you must, become what you must, or others will pay for your cowardice. You will accept the gifts offered to you.
Swords, not words! I shall go forth at your command.
A gift? For me? Someone else can carry it.
Point the sword and with all speed, comrade.
Gather your party before venturing forth.
Please, you did promise. We need to go to my family's land and join in the defense.
For honor and glory, Helm guides my path. The best leaders also follow.
Yes.
Who are you?
I hear you well enough. It shall be done, and done well. Very well.
I shall feast on your heart. I shall feast on your heart. I shall feast on your heart.
Ribald Bardaman at your service. The Adventure Mart's the finest shopping in all of Faerun. Widest selection, lowest prices, and nary a fancy illustration. Just the goods, fair and plain.
Long live the Order of the Most Radiant Heart, for I draw from the pool of light and strike in their name.
For the glory of all.
Greetings, good customer. A pearl to you.
all speed, comrade.
You must gather your party before venturing forth.
For honor and glory!
I have hidden myself well.
I stand amongst the righteous. Helm guides my path.
I have hidden myself well. I have hidden myself well. I have hidden myself well. I have hidden myself well.
At your order, the best leaders also follow.
I have hidden myself well.
It shall be done, and done well. What is it? Aye, 'tis good to adventure in such a place. The blood quickens knowing that evil is so near.
I have hidden myself well.
I shall go forth at your command. Point the sword, and I shall strike. Very well.
I have hidden myself well. I'm waiting. Nothing to it.
I hear you well enough.
Very well.
Stand amongst the righteous. With all speed, comrade.
Finally! Someplace livable.
I have hidden myself.
At your order. For honor and glory!
You must gather your party before venturing forth.
I have hidden myself well. Whatever you want.
What is it now? The light shall prevail.
Well. I'm waiting. I have hidden myself well.
I shall go forth at your command.
Of course. If that's what you want. My attack has no effect. I'm waiting. My attack has no effect. I have hidden myself well. Yeah, whatever you desire.
Insertus Pulcher.
My attack has no... Ooh, you wild bastard.
Point the sword, and I shall strike. Helm guides my path.
My attack has no effect.
Inconceivable! It's immune!
No effect.
Myself well.
I hear you well enough. The best leaders also follow. I stand amongst them. It shall be done, and done well.
Nothing to it. I have hidden myself well.
What?
Be quick with...
I have hidden myself well.
At your order. Very well. What do you want? Ask you for less.
Myself well.
Every chance, jump on my sword while you can, even.
How can I help? I will do what I can.
What is it now? I shall go forth at your command.
I have hidden myself well. Yes.
Am I needed?
Me axe be bloody ready, armored, sharpened, and raring to go.
Point the sword, and I shall strike.
Please, let me help.
Aye, that be sounding right. This tomb looks to be looted. The rank, stinking bastards beat us here. Those scoundrels will dine on me sup of cold steel afore I'm through with them. My weapon has no effect. My weapon has no effect. A skullbreaker! Thrice over their graves I'll be dancing, I swear. Stolen from under me! I'll do the work of ferreting out where the blasted book will be, and those cracknuts taken away!
Myself well.
Next swing!
Bo says, what? Live by the sword. Live a good long time.
I hear you well enough. With all speed, comrade.
Minions! Aid your master!
I stand amongst the right for honor and glory. Helm guides my path.
I've hidden myself well.
Stand. You rest each night uneasy. Yes, you are weary. You struggle daily. It will not end, you know, until you acknowledge what you are. You walk as a mortal, taking no advantage from your heritage, from your talents within. So many things of flesh are greater than you. Walk among them, these beasts that are less than you are. See their strength, see how easily you fall to their muscle and skill. Why do you stand for this? Why do you submit to the flesh when death is bred in your bones? Do you realize the power you might hold? When the world of flesh is beneath you, even creatures mysterious and magical will fall. Follow and receive the gift you are owed by the blood in your veins. Follow, if only to protect the weak that fell because of you.
At your order, the best leaders also follow.
That's it, guys. See you later.